Tuesday, October 14th. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Soboroff, Madison, Kim, and Saltzman are present, and we have a quorum. Number one on the agenda, commission comments.
Yes, I'm just really quick comment. So on May 23rd, 2014, Special Order 7 became effective in the LAPD. It's a much improved special order, really true to the letter of the law, and the U visa, which is a humanitarian form of relief for non-citizen victims of serious crimes that assists law enforcement in the investigation and prosecution of the criminal activity. And I wanted to request a verbal report from the Department on the implementation of Special Order 7, specifically related to the law enforcement agency U visa certification. And I request that verbal report be given on November 18th and put on the November 18th agenda. Thanks.
Very good. Commissioner Saltzman.
Not this morning, thank you.
Commissioner Madison? Okay, neither. Let's go ahead.
Item number 2, the report of the Chief of Police, Chief Beck.
Morning, Chief.
Morning, Commissioners. So I will begin my report, as is general, with my comments on crime. I wanted to preface that with just a brief prelude, though. You know, we spend a lot of time, and I spend a lot of time talking about metrics, things that we measure in my opening statements to the Commission, and that happens every week. I don't think there's any other police department that is as open about their performance metrics as this one is. But as always, you know, the metrics are only as good as the numbers that are behind them. The Los Angeles Police Department strives to be as accurate as possible, but I think that it is incumbent on everybody to understand that these are all subjective categories, and that the determination of various crime codes is a subjective matter. And because of that, there can be varying interpretations of which crime fits in which category, and whether or not a crime should fit in a category at all. I say that because there is much speculation about whether or not we are too stringent in our performance metrics judgment of management. And I think that it's important for folks to understand that I and my other top staff have been on both sides of this table and have been held to these standards and understand the difficulty in tracking and reporting so many various different performance metrics. And we take that into account as we measure these things. And we also take into account the knowledge that none of this is going to be perfect. And it's not perfection that is the goal here. It is improved performance. And improved performance can definitely be measured through these metrics, and I think that's what's important. So with that, I'll begin talking about Part 1 crime. Perhaps the number that is most discussed in the city is the homicide rate. Homicides in the city of Los Angeles are down 8.8% from 2013 and 16.5% from 2012. To give you an idea what that means, that's 198 homicides so far this year to date, which is 19 fewer than had occurred in 2013 at this year to date. Of those 198 homicides, approximately 117 appear to be gang-related. That is a significant portion of our homicides and is, in fact, what drives the homicide rate in Los Angeles. Rapes have increased this year to date, both in the category of what we call old rape, which is the standard pre-2014 as put forward in the UCR by the FBI. And they have increased by 8%. That's 51 more occurrences as compared to 2013. To put that in some perspective, however, it is 7% less than had occurred in 2012. The category of sex crimes that have been added to the rape population and won't be reported in total this year as the FBI requirement kicks in next year, but we're doing this so that we have a baseline, is up 16% from the year prior. That gives a total rape category increase of 10.3% as compared to 2013. But again, to put some perspective on it, it's down slightly, 0.2% below 2012. Robberies are down 3%, and aggravated assault, the category that we have commented on the most and studied the most this year, is up in total 20% and 12% as compared to 2012. I think that Chief Paysinger reported last week a large portion of this is related to our increase in spousal abuse and a small increase in child abuse. And we're going to do we have a set of CompStats that will be focused totally on ag assaults over the next week and coming weeks, so that we'll be able to report more completely to the Commission on this category. Property crime, which is the vast majority of crime that occurs in the city of Los Angeles, almost 80% of the crime is down across the board. Burglaries are down 8%. Vehicle thefts are down 8.2%. Thefts from vehicle are down 9.8%. And personal thefts are down 1.3%. That gives a total property crime reduction in the city of Los Angeles of 6.3%. And violent crime as an increase, driven by the ag assault rate, of 8.4% as compared to last year. Of note, though, compared to 2012, violent crime is down, and that's down 1.6%. Gives us an aggregate reduction of Part 1 crime since 2013 of 3.8%, and since 2012 of 6.7%. Incidents of shots fired are down in the city. Incidents of victims shot, down 12%. Categorical uses of force, the force that is most serious and the one that eventually comes to the Police Commission, are down 29% this year. And officer-involved shootings, this is a category that is much discussed and sometimes criticized in law enforcement because of a lack of reporting. We've had 23 officer-involved shootings in 2014 as compared to 34 in 2013. That's a 32.4% reduction. Gang-related crime is down 10% in the aggregate. As I said, gang homicides down 10.7%. Which has had a significant impact, on our total homicide rate. Traffic collisions, we've had, and just to put it in perspective, we've had 35,000 traffic collisions in the city of Los Angeles this year to date, as compared to 34,000 last year at this time to date. That's a 3.3% increase in traffic collisions. Our driving under the influence related traffic collisions are about even. We have had 6 more than last year, and that's out of a total of 1,791. Hit and runs are down in the city of Los Angeles. All hit and runs are down almost 2%, and serious hit and runs, those that result in hospitalization, are down 14%, and the most egregious category of hit and runs, those involving a death, are down 38%. Motor vehicle versus pedestrians is about even, slight reduction, but only of 3 incidents in a population of about 2,200. Bicycle-involved traffic collisions are down significantly, about 10.5%. That translates into about 200 less bicycle-involved traffic accidents. Sworn personnel, we have 9,934 sworn personnel. We have 2,735 civilian personnel. Unfortunately, we have 612 civilian vacancies. We have 405 police officers that are reserves. We have 372 specialist volunteers. We have 45 chaplains, and we have 5,448 cadets. And that concludes my report.
Chief, I'm really happy to hear about the fact that you're going to go deep in the aggravated assault issue at CompStat, because anybody who's ever been to CompStat knows that's a place where they go deep. And I believe that as as a part of good community policing, and we're getting better and better at community policing, even though we're already the best in the country, people feel more comfortable in contacting us and making reports. And my question to you is it possible in that CompStat and in some of this to break out of this 20% increase in aggravated assault, how much of that is simply, especially in domestic violence and other, I think it was child abuse, where people feel more comfortable in pressing the charges versus the fact that really there's more crime going on? Is there any way to make that determination? You know, one is about a safer city, and another is about people feeling safer in reporting things that are already going on. And the other is, will CompStat, in that CompStat, as you go deep, will it break those numbers down and have those numbers gone up because of reclassifications of some sorts of crimes? Or is this just a hard number? There are 20% more aggravated assaults being committed in Los Angeles than there were before.
Well, you know, there's a number of layers to that question. First, the aggravated assaults that I comment on in the police commission meeting are those that meet the Part 1 criteria.
Right.
So Part 1 criteria is a smaller percentage of domestic violence. So the large majority of domestic violence is of Part 2 in nature. So when we look at domestic violence as a whole, it's important to look at it not only from the what's classified as Part 1, which is generally because of an outcome, be an injury or the type of weapon used, but also as a whole to see where the increases in reporting occur. And so one of the things we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have to a large extent already break down the occurrences not only by area of the city, but by ethnic population, by age group, and see if there is a greater impact in any particular category. And then we'll be able to look at that category and see if possibly you're right, because we do understand, and everybody should understand, that domestic violence is possibly, with the exception of rape, the most underreported crime. You know, when I talk about homicide numbers are very concrete. You know, I mean, there's obviously some, you know, there's variations in what's justifiable and you know, what may be a natural as opposed to a homicide, but they have a definite and finite number. You know, things like rape and domestic violence that can go so underreported have a huge amount of flexibility. And the things that you're talking about, willingness to report, have a big impact on those numbers. You know, there's very little willingness to report in relation to things like vehicle theft, which is also a crime that is largely reported because of insurance requirements and because of DMV trails and that kind of thing, and obviously murder, which is almost always reported, you know, and only in very, very rare circumstances escapes the scrutiny of law enforcement. So we look at those things, and that'll be one of the things we report on. Now, it's very difficult to prove a negative. You know, it's very difficult to say that this wouldn't have been reported in the past, and you know, but what we'll do is try to delve into those populations where we've had the most impact with our outreach, and see if we've see if that's where the.
But our outreach is increasing, so we're encouraging people to make reports to make the numbers go up.
Well, and you know, this is what the mayor and I and the city attorney had a press conference, because this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And, you know, while I hate, you know, no police chief likes his crime numbers to go up, but if it's because people are more likely to report,
I agree 100%.
well, then I will take that responsibility.
Good.
But I think you know, I don't want to lay the increase off on that, because I think it's important to look at it, you know, in its totality and not just grab for the easy answer, which would be the increase in reporting. You know, we also have to look at increasing classifications. You know, the department has undergone significant training to make sure that we capture all things that are Part 1 relative to crime, and to see if that has had an impact too. So we will delve into all of those things.
Thank you, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have one public comment card. We have Mr. Herman.
Why are you walking that way? Why don't you just walk over there and get to the microphone? We got our own time constraints.
I'm sorry, sir, they asked me to walk this way the last time.
Not when you're sitting right there. Just walk over there and get on the microphone, will you?
Excuse me. By the way, good morning. Obviously, there is a problem and no excuse for violence. But in regards to Chief Beck's report, yes, when it comes to assault, I can tell you for a fact, I'm a victim of assault. Just recently, on October 7th, during a public meeting in council chambers by a public official by the name of Paul Koretz. And yes, it is difficult for us to go report these incidents due to time and sensitivity or demeanor of being belittled by a public official or anyone with authority that takes the wrong action during general public comment for just one simple minute. 1 minute. So there is no excuse when it comes to any violence, whether we are minorities or whether we are of authority. There has to be a discretion of education to understand, are we adequately prepared for a circumstance that we can't control? Obviously, Paul Koretz didn't have the ability to control that action. That's why I today have to walk around like a fool wearing a sling. That's violence. An educator being attacked during 1 minute of public comment for 2 hours and 3 minutes on live demand TV, that's belittling to me. But let's go on to the point. Determining base training should be a priority to improve, not just within the department, but adequately provide the officers with the experience of performance. We already know that City Hall's performance is a failure based on what I just said. No ability of self-control by a public official. And how far will they go even further down the line if no one like myself who's disabled comes up here and speaks on behalf of persons with disability? Keep the time.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3, the report of the Executive Director, Mr. Tefank.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the commissions. Very brief item. Next Tuesday, there will be no regular police commission meeting. You will have a community meeting, which will be hosted by Councilmember Curran Price in Council District 9. It'll be held at Green Meadows Recreation Center, 431 East 89th Street in Los Angeles. The meeting begins at 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. and would encourage the public to attend that meeting. And that concludes my comments for today.
Okay, we do have one public comment card. We have Mr. Herman.
Item 3 is very important for the public's interest because we need more transparency to situations that involves the public's interest in its program services and adequate attention to these particular status of pending projects. Many of us aren't aware of when the projects of many of the police department facilities are going to be completed. Will they fall within the timeline or will they go over and exceed a budget? On top of that note, again, we're during agenda items. I know my comment is coming up on item D, just $4,500 of Los Angeles Police Academy Magnet School Foundation. That's excellent. It's very, very good. And so turning it back over regarding Councilman Price and some public officials providing us with the information of this ongoing event taking effect. The best way to find it and locate it is online. That's how I discovered it. I might be a participant there depending on how I feel. So, again, if you want to be informed, go to the library, open up to public meetings. As long as there's an agenda, you have a right to speak or be heard under agenda and make a public comment. Do not be afraid. You're a public speaker. You have that right. As you heard earlier, my rights were violated. I was assaulted, but I moved forward without grudge. Thank you.
Okay, item number 4, the report of the Inspector General, Mr. Bustamante.
Thank you, Commissioners. I have nothing to comment on.
Okay, we do have one comment card. We have Mr. Herman.
There's no excuse when it comes to patrol cars having what they call fictitious numbers. There's been a report and there's been some disturbance and allegations brought up about cars that are being used with numbers that don't relate to this department, the LAPD department. Now, whether you're investigating people or following people, you have to have accountability and that responsibility, having accuracy to identify what could be possible illegal and civil rights actions that you're taking against the public. And Mr. Bustamante, I'm asking that the Inspector General, on behalf of the public and public interest, use your time to investigate with the FBI to secure that patrol cars are not using fictitious numbers in their patrols, that there are adequate patrol cars in designated areas that are high with crime and violence. I would know. Again, assaulted October 7th, general public comment in City Hall goes to show you that anything can happen nowadays in a small city like Los Angeles. So let's not become victims of significant incidents. Let us all be aware, paying attention to the situation of what's happening in our world today. For we all know that the world is spiraling out of control with what goes on in the East. But let's keep it all here in Los Angeles, though, because again, we are the hit and run capital of the world, and we are now becoming the most violent city in the world, like back in the days of Chicago. Let's stop the abuse. Let's stop the violence. Thank you, and have a good morning, Mr. Steve.
Okay, we're on item number 5. Item number 5 consists of information items and filed items relative to noise variances and special event permits submitted for the period ending October 10, 2014. And we do have 2 comment cards on item number 5. We have Michael Karzowski and Christopher Sutton.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Michael Charchinsky. I'm the
Mike, can
manager.
you move the mic, can you move the mic
Certainly.
towards?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Great. My name is Michael Charchinsky. I'm managing director of the Westin Bonaventure Hotel. Speaking regarding variance request 14236, 237, and 238. This is regarding allowing the MTA to work overnight in front of the Westin Bonaventure Hotel. Constantly, the MTA is violating the city code and the FTA code. I have a report that I'd like to hand in that shows over the last 90 days, 29 of those days, they've gone over 80 decibels, 90 decibels, and close to 100 decibels. And this is during the daytime. We have airline crew and pilots that sleep during the daytime and especially during the night. That number doubles. Our noise complaints from our guests have gone up 25% since the work began during the daytime. These variances will allow work during the night. And I understand the MTA says, well, we're just going to pull cable, but that's typically what they said before. They said they wouldn't break any of the rules and not violate the code, but they have been for the last 90 days. With that said, we just respectfully request that you revoke these variances, sit down with us, and take a look at exactly what the code is. The MTA is claiming they don't have to follow the City of Los Angeles code. And I'd like to disagree with that they should follow the city code and the state and federal codes, especially in a residential area near a hotel. I appreciate your help with this and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, sir. Morning.
Good morning. My name is Christopher Sutton. I'm an attorney for the Westin Bonaventure Hotel. Did members of the commission receive the letter that I submitted on Friday the 10th? I have additional copies if you got it.
We'll take them.
I think there's 8 copies in that stack. And what we point out in this is that not only does the LA City Code specifically ban these activities during the nighttime hours, but the Master Cooperation Agreement between the city and the MTA commit the MTA to complying with local codes. So the argument that, well, the MTA is a state or federal or some other agency doesn't comply, they're contractually obligated to comply. What's unusual about the 3 variances that came out on Friday as part of your agenda packet, unlike the variances granted for elsewhere for the Regional Connector Subway project, they do not contain the standard paragraph or the standard sentence that almost every other noise variance contains, which is, if complaints are received, this variance may be revoked. And since the 2012, when the commission staff first granted noise variances for this project, which starts in Little Tokyo, goes down 2nd Street, and then goes down Flower, every one of those would contain this sentence that if complaints were received, the variance could be revoked. So we're asking the commission to either calendar a revocation of this hearing or calendar a full hearing, or, as Mr. Charchinsky said, meet with the Bonaventure staff, meet with Mr. Patrick Surge, who is the facilities manager at the Bonaventure, who has been taking decibel readings on the MTA work for the past 2 years, how he has been submitting consistent complaints to the MTA, and they have been consistently ignored for the last 2 years. And in the last 90 days, things have gotten worse. There's going to be an injunction issued by the federal court on this project very soon, and we hope that the MTA will comply with that injunction because they've been found to violate the National Environmental Policy Act. Thank you for your time.
Sir, you know that the city attorney and the rules do not allow us to respond or ask questions during public.
I understand, but you could calendar an agenda item for a future meeting.
Mr. President, if I may, I'll look at the city attorney. Can I comment since this is on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to clarify for the commission, under the Los Angeles Municipal Code, Section 41.40, the executive director is empowered to issue noise ordinances. They are not within the authority of the Board of Police Commissioners. That has been delegated to me. What I'll do is I'll reach out and I'll have conversation with Mr. Charchinsky. We have had dialogue in the past. I understand their issues, and I also understand the need to have work done at nighttime. So I'll be happy to meet with them and deal with their issues, but within the charter, within the ordinance, the power rests with me. If they don't like my decision once I do make one, then they can certainly come back to this commission.
Thank you.
I urge you to look at my letter dated October 10th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're now on item number 6, presentations. Do we have any
I
presentations?
just have a question
Oh, sure.
of the executive director.
Sure.
Is it suitable for us to ask you to let us know?
Absolutely.
Inside?
I have no problem with that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Item number 6, presentations. Do we have any presentations this morning?
Not today.
Okay, thank you. Item number 7, consent agenda items. These items are considered to be routine and uncontroversial, upon which the board is provided with adequate information for approval without inquiry or discussion. We do have one comment card on 7D.
We approve items 7A, B, C, and items 7E, F, and G.
And I'll second that with thanks to everyone, including the $18 one and the multi-$1,000 one. It's all important to us. Do we have, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's do number D.
Item number D, and we have Mr. Herman.
Good, I can do some more emails.
Well, Angelinos and residents of Los Angeles, here we go. Cleaning services valued at $4,500 for the Los Angeles Police Academy Magnet School Foundation for the benefit of training division as set forth. Is this something that the public should accept? Really, there needs to be some reasonable fees here. This seems to be something very spongent against the taxpayers, absorbing what we now have in our understanding that the city continues to fall short of its budget. So how do we come up with such a figure of $4,500 for cleaning service? I could do it for probably a third of the cost. Or even better, I would volunteer, since I am an advocate, a civil rights advocate, I would love to come in and clean this facility one day for you, gentlemen, and the city of Los Angeles at no cost. Because it would be my service, my gratitude, giving something back to the city of Los Angeles, in which I've always done in the past. Even within education, I've done a great job. So let's keep it realistic. Let's keep this reasonable so that the gutting of our budget and the advocate fundings would go towards our rank and file officers who do an excellent job of patrol, who deserve a better, higher pay equivalent to what is happening nowadays, where people are having to work 2 to 3 jobs or even take on an overtime job just to satisfy their family needs. So again, anytime one of you wish to ask me to come in and clean, be free to ask me and we'll make an appointment with that. Thank you.
Are you available Tuesday mornings at 9:30?
Yeah, for
I move approval of item 7B.
Second?
All in favor?
Thank you. We're now on item number 8, regular agenda items. 8A is a verbal, and 8B, there is a comment card.
I move approval of item 8C.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We will go to item 8A, verbal presentation and update from the commanding officer and Community Police Advisory Board representative regarding community-initiated problem-solving, crime strategies, and other programs and goals within the central area.
Morning. Morning. Welcome. How are you? Thanks for all you do for us.
No problem. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Captain Mike Orb. I'm the commanding officer of Central Area. It's my co-chair for CPAB, Brady Metcalf. I've been in Central for the past 3 years, 2 of those as a patrol captain, and the last year as an area captain. And taking on the issues concerning the CPABs, Brady and I took a look at and evaluated the board itself, making sure that we had adequate representation across the board. We looked at it. We have our bid members. The bid members were well represented. One of the things that we noticed or we commented on was an area that we could improve on, and that area was the Skid Row community. So we put our heads together and looked into the best way of adequately bringing in the right folks in that area, and we were able to bring in a pastor, one of our clergy council onto the board, and several of the Skid Row community members themselves. I noticed that once we did that, the CPAB took on a different stance and a more rounded view. So we also had security personnel involved in that, and so I think that it was more meaningful and better represented. So as you look across our numbers, we're about 4.5 square miles in Central Area. We have 450 personnel, 100 civilians, 300 sworn, 50 reserves. We have a residential population of about 65,000 and climbing, so the area is changing rapidly. Our latest homeless count, which is a nighttime homeless count, is 1,930, and that's actually 1,930 people living on and residing on the streets at night. So That number has increased throughout the year, and hence the reasons for a different view into the Skid Row area. I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Brady.
Brady, what's your, first of all, what's your background and why are you doing this?
Well, I've been doing this since about 2007, and I used to be in the security field, and I've recently transitioned into the nonprofit field. But just been born and raised in LA, and always enjoyed working in the downtown area. Having the security angle certainly made working with the police department appropriate, and I've enjoyed the relationship and enjoy continuing it.
Good, thanks.
Sure. So as far as the the Part 1 crimes and the reduction, I'll skip over that part. But what our goals are really to help continue to reduce crime by holding the CPAB meetings, getting good feedback from those in the community, finding out where problem areas are, and helping let the senior lead officers and the captain know where efforts can be focused best. We've made a good push with a junior or a youth CPAB, especially engaging Job Corps in the downtown central area. They've hosted a few of our CPAB meetings, and they've been great to work with and helped us find a lot of good young folks that are interested in police work and seeing how they can be more participative in what's going on. We've done more with social media as of recent, opening up a Facebook page, Twitter, and I believe Instagram as well. Yeah. And our annual goal is to, as the captain noted, is to continue to increase our membership, especially in the Skid Row area with service providers, folks that live in the Skid Row area, they live in an SRO, or even folks that may be living in a tent on the street. We're happy to have them at our meetings. We appreciate their feedback. Some of you may know LA CAN. LA CAN also comes to our meetings, and we feel that all voices should be heard and listened to. We are working harder on trying to get more of the educational component in the downtown area from Colburn School, FITM, and some of the other schools. We used to have them. We're trying to get them back involved. We like to continue our outreach, continue with our youth CPAB. I've been in the area since 2007. We do meet regularly each month, third Thursday at 9 a.m. at the El Pueblo Administration Building. However, we often hold field trips. Next month, we're going to go down to the harbor, hopefully take a ride on some of the police boats, or at least see them. But we've been to Piper Tech, we've been to the 911 call center, Emergency Operations Center, and the Academy. 17 board members currently, so it doesn't take much for us to get a good increase in the percentage if we just add a few more. Many guest speakers at many of our meetings. We bring a lot of folks in from both the city and the county. County Department of Mental Health has been a recent speaker. That usually adds for a very lively meeting and a lot of discussion, especially with the Skid Row component in our area. But we are happy to have anyone come and speak that adds value to what we're trying to do. We have a number of committees. Crime Prevention Committee was primarily our main group, getting together each month and talking about problems in the area. Our Junior CPAB Committee is primarily folks that are sworn and civilian members that help orchestrate that, and also part of our Youth Committee. And then community events, certainly National Night Out, and something we held recently on October 5th was a Skid Row community cleanup. Second one that we've held. We usually get about 25, 30 volunteers, and this year we had 3 power washing groups that came out, and we only cleaned the area of 6th and San Julian, 6th Street from Wall to San Pedro, and San Julian from 5th to 7th. It's a really good event. We did invite service providers to come out and do outreach that day as well. There was a couple of groups that came out. Not sure if we got anyone off the street that day, but we certainly made an effort to, and there were folks that live out there that were appreciative of the cleaning and the outreach. Format of our meetings typically is guest speaker first. Captain does his report. The committees give their reports. The basic cars give their reports. We talk about any old and new business, and then we have open discussion. Sometimes a meeting could be an entire meeting of open discussion, depending on what's going on in the area. Moving forward, hoping to continue to diversify the folks that are on our CPAB board, continue to push the junior CPAB, keeping the youth involved, and to get at least 5 new board members before the end of this year. And here's where you can find us: Facebook, Twitter. We do have an old website that we're we're not really using anymore, so Facebook and Twitter are the best way to find us. If not, just give us a phone call.
Good. Great presentation. Questions, comments, anyone?
You know, if I may, Commissioner,
Yeah,
you
Chief.
know, I'll just make a brief comment. Some of the divisions, I'm familiar with all of our divisions, and I've worked all of them, but some of them I'm very familiar with because of past assignments, and I'm very familiar with Central because I was the captain there some years ago. And there is no place in LA that is has more diverse issues to deal with than Central.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a tough command, and it is a command that really depends on its relationship with the community, because Central's community is so not only provider but business driven and government driven, and you know, it's there are just so many moving parts, and Mike has done a really good job, and Brady, I really appreciate you helping him. It's in every division, you know, it's important to have partnerships, but maybe Central more than every other one, because there are just so many interests. You know, when you ever look at the population, and Mike says it's 65,000 people, well, that's nighttime at midnight, but daytime at noon, it's 1.5 million, and you know, all of those people are stakeholders, and so you have to find a way to reach out to them, and I just appreciate the job that they do, and I know that they have some very tough and very public issues to deal with on the homeless side, and I know that it's been a challenge for them, and it's something that I appreciate their efforts on.
Thanks. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, good job. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now on item 8B, Inspector General's report dated October 8th, 2014, regarding the investigation of the department's patrol deployment practices as set forth. And we have one comment card, Mr. Herman.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm going to
I
ask.
apologize, it's not Mr. Herman.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
It's not a card for Mr. Herman, it's Mr. Mark Cronin.
Commissioners, I'm going to ask my staff who just sat down at the table in front of you to introduce themselves, and then I'll proceed.
Okay.
Good morning, Commission, Chief. My name is Jim Willis, in charge of Special Investigation Compliance Section, Office of Inspector General, and sitting next to me is Brian Buckner. He is the lead investigator and the case manager, excuse me, on the report before you today.
Okay. We're going to have the speaker first? Is that the way?
No.
Yes, the comment first?
No, we can have the comment after.
Okay.
Commissioners, just to give you a little background, I'll tell you how the report starts, and then if you have any other question, the two gentlemen sitting in front of you will be more than happy to talk about any of the particulars. This issue was brought to my attention by a single P3 that came to our office and told us about issue occurring within the department and asked us to look into it, in which we did. And as we started looking into it, we talked to other officers in LAPD, and they gave us other information which allowed us to put together an investigative plan to look into this issue to see the extent that it was occurring. We were notified of approximately 5 divisions, but we focused primarily on 2 because our focus was to get to the bottom of this very quickly and see if we can get resolution to this so we could prevent this from happening in the future as fast as possible. So after we were able to verify that this was in fact occurring, we immediately went to the department and talked to the department, who took the information that we had and some of the concerns that we had communicated to them and started to immediately act throughout the department, so all 21 divisions, to make a more robust response than we were capable given our limited staff and also given the time constraints. And after their efforts, we were able to see, at least based upon the information that we have, that those practices had stopped. Now, what we have also done is work with the department in putting together a plan to make sure that this type of action does not occur in the future. That's listed in the back of the report in the recommendation section, where both the department and myself, the Office of Inspector General, come up with an audit plan and an inspection plan to make sure that all the divisions are tested and that this does not reoccur. I'm happy that we were able to get to this so quickly, and I'd like to commend the department for actually working with us in ferreting this out as quick as possible and making such a strong stand on this. And I'm confident, at least based upon the information that I have, that this behavior is no longer occurring. But subject to any questions that you may have, either myself or the two gentlemen in front of you are more than happy to answer them.
May we take the speaker now, and then, because I want to wrap that into the overall conversation.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
My name is Mark Cronin. I'm a director at the Los Angeles Police Protective League. The ghost car problem has been going on for a long time through many of the LAPD divisions. This practice created safety concerns for any officer on patrol throughout the city of Los Angeles and gave the public misperception that more officers were out patrolling their neighborhoods when in fact they were not. We believe this practice has been quashed from the top down. Because of the relationships we've developed with the Office of Inspector General, and because our officers trust that he will do the right thing, many of them came forward to report this practice to him and his staff. Because of this trust between officers and the Office of Inspector General, this issue was resolved quickly. We will continue to bring issues to him in an effort to improve the department and make sure that management is concentrating on safety and service and not only statistics. The Los Angeles Police Protective League is thankful for the independence of the Office of Inspector General. This, by design, affords all LAPD officers an opportunity for fair and independent checks and balances. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. I have questions. I'm not sure if this suggests that the officers who are participating in what's called this ghost car process, does this mean that they did not go to their supervisors, or that they did go to their supervisors in some instances and nothing was done? I'm encouraged that Mr. Cronin of the Protective League is complimenting the Inspector General's office for having the trust of the people who went to them. But I'm trying to understand, does this mean that it was the Inspector General's office who they first went to? Did they not go to their own supervisors in order to report this behavior?
Your Honor, excuse me, Commissioner, I can respond to that. I went back into old U.S. Attorney mode.
Your Honor?
Yes. Sorry. What we looked at, when we looked at a variety of different scenarios, and what we saw when we looked at the data is that it was kind of it ran the gambit. It was a little bit all over the place. And we saw some behavior that, at least when we were looking at it, it turned our focus in not so much the cause of how things were actually occurring and kind of getting to that storyline of how things were happening on a day-to-day situation, but really concentrating on how do we work with the department and trying to nip this thing in the butt. Because the concern that I have is whenever you go into a different route and you start looking at the more fulsome investigation, sometimes you delay the response by sometimes several months and years. So my emphasis had been mostly to drill down as quickly and as thoroughly as I could to identify the issue and then bring it to the department and ask them to take a look at this and to remedy it. But in a very quick response, we saw variations on what was happening, and there were several different variations on how this information was being communicated, and those people came to us at a later point.
So I think you said some of everything. And I guess my question largely has to do with culture within the department. So to the extent that there is an expectation that the department will meet responsibilities insofar as the numbers of cars on the street and officers on patrol, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm still trying to understand is, did you detect, and maybe it's not for the Inspector General's office, maybe it's for the Office of Operations or the chief, but I'm trying to understand culturally if we had a history or a record of officers coming forward and saying that they were concerned about this practice, or was nothing said, and except when some of them went straight to the Inspector General? My question is about culture.
Well, Commissioner, I can tell you this much, that on a Thursday at 3 o'clock, an officer did come into the office, and he told us and described what was a ghost car. To that end, we didn't know what it was. I had been 20 years with the department before I came over to the office, and I had never heard of the practice, let alone the term. So after we were told of a ghost car and what it was, our office took it for a spin, and we found out there was merit to the allegation as charged by the officer. As to culture, I'd never heard of it before, and I know that's why Chief Pasinger is sitting to my right now.
Chief?
Mr. President, members of the commission, if you would just permit me, Chief, if you would just permit me, just a couple of comments in reference to today's points. As referenced by the Inspector General and also the report that you have in front of you, this information did come to the attention of the department early this year by virtue of a verbal report from the Inspector General concerning the possibility of what was believed to be at that time inappropriate deployment practices in certain area commands in the city. Just for point of clarification, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the IG's definition of what he believed was inappropriate deployment was, in essence, units that were logged on to the department's dispatch system that were actually not available for assigned calls for service by Communications Division. It wasn't that the units didn't actually exist, but in fact, according to the reports, that those units or that unit wasn't in the field. For the purposes of deployment, just to kind of give you an idea, patrol units that are considered to be regularly assigned calls for service are typically 2-officer units. We designate them as A cars, X cars, and those are 2 officers. Periodically, there are single officer units we designate as L cars and XL cars. Those 2 units can also be assigned calls for service. In response to the revelation by the Inspector General, I immediately met, as he mentioned, with the bureau chiefs and the commanders, actually on several occasions, and we discussed the issues at a number of our regular staff meetings, drilling down, trying to make some determination based upon their insight whether this kind of practice actually had occurred or was occurring. Also in the report that you have before you, there is reference that I sent an email, which I did to all OO staff officers, which I directed that if this type of deployment was occurring, that it was to terminate immediately. In addition to that, I directed that a comprehensive inspection of a number of different commands throughout the Office of Operations be conducted to determine whether this unauthorized deployment practice or practices might be occurring. That inspection involved an analysis of nearly a dozen different data sets, DFARs, watch commanders logs, that sort of things, to see whether or not there were tendencies, any spikes, any trends, any conditions that would lead me to believe, or the other executive officers in OO, that this kind of practice was going on. I would say that that thorough analysis didn't reveal any misrepresentation or fabrication of deployment in any of the commands. And again, I would quick to add that that's not to say that it didn't occur. I would say in very strong terms that there was no evidence that I determined. At some point in time, I also received additional information from the Office of Inspector General that they discovered some email communications, some other evidence from one of the commands related to this type of staffing issue. Based upon that revelation, I personally initiated a complaint investigation to give the department an opportunity to determine to what extent, to a greater or lesser degree, whether this practice was ongoing, either to confirm or refute the allegations. That investigation right now is sitting in PSB, and I directed my staff to turn over the results of our inspection, the one that I commissioned, to PSB for the purposes of that investigation. For your purposes, members of the Commission, I believe it's important to recognize the sheer scope of the uniform deployment for the LAPD. Over the course of the year, we handle in excess of 800,000 calls for service. That figure doesn't include officer-initiated activities that go on a daily basis, and I would say that those numbers actually mimic the number of radio calls that we handle. They amount to hundreds of thousands of officer contacts. And in order to meet this demand, at the direction of the chief, we deploy in the neighborhood of somewhere between 125, 130,000 units, response units every year. Now, that figure doesn't include gang units, it doesn't include senior lead officers, it doesn't include task force personnel, staffing for First Amendment kinds of activities and other special events. The total uniform deployment for the LAPD Department Office of Operations migrates somewhere in the neighborhood of nearly 200,000 two-officer and single-officer units a year. Also, for the sake of clarity, there's also scores of other uniform personnel other than patrol officers that are regularly assigned to the field, such as footbeats, cars that take reports in support of SID, taking fingerprints, that sort of thing, gang officers, other special uniform assignments, all of whom can be activated at any given time by the watch commander, depending on the demands of the watch for that particular day. Again, is it possible that mistakes could have been made? Which is the reason I initiated the complaint based upon the information that I received from the Office of the Inspector General. However, I can say that the inspection that I commissioned didn't reveal any deceptive practices, troublesome deployment patterns, any inconsistencies. It's also important for me to say that the patrol plan guidelines, as represented in the Inspector General's report, are just that. They're guidelines, they're recommendations. And depending on the circumstance, those numbers can vary substantially from day to day, month to month, and throughout the course of the year. Rarely does a day go by when one of the area commands throughout OO falls short of their planned deployment. Sick, ill, injured, IOD, court. There is an array of reasons why the areas might fall short of their deployment scheme. And counter to representations, seldom do we require 100% patrol plan mandates. That mark is frequently set well below that benchmark to provide the commanding officers a fair degree of independence, autonomy, and latitude in order to flex their resources in order to address spikes and trends and clusters of crime that occur in their communities throughout the course of the days and weeks. In my review of the facts over the last several months, having dealt with this issue, I found no instance where public safety was in no way compromised. If I may, if you would just permit me, there's a couple of observations I'd like to make. The IG's report offers that the daily logged-on report is a means by which the department assesses deployment. The board should be aware that the racer broadcast that comes out on a daily basis, twice a day, in the morning, or actually the afternoon, and again, somewhere around the 2200 hour, that's 9 and 10 o'clock, is not now, nor has it ever been, a means by which the department authenticates the deployment. I don't know if you were here at the time, maybe you, Commissioner Saltzman, when in the administration of Chief Bratton, he desired a situation where he would have a better awareness on a daily basis, the number of units, approximate number of units, and the types of units that were available to have a better understanding of what we could draw upon in the event of a major incident someplace in the city of Los Angeles. It was then and is still used for that specific purpose and not to validate deployment at all. There are several examples that are given in the conclusion of that report. Example of a unit logging on and going code 6 at the station and only conducting follow-up investigations having to do with fingerprint investigation, that sort of thing. In that instance, and again, I've not had an opportunity to look at the methodology or the work product of the Inspector General's report, it's likely that that officer was an area latent print officer, more commonly known as an ALPO unit, whose responsibility is to do just that, is take fingerprints. In that instance, I'm fairly confident there was no intention of trying to misrepresent the deployment statistics if in that particular instance that information is accurate. There's another example where there's an LCAR working the kit room and not going to the field. There are numerous legitimate reasons why that may have occurred. The officer's partner having been summoned to court, him or her having their partner being late for work, some type of priority administrative function. And so when an officer is compelled to work by him or herself, typically what happens is that officer will be assigned to the kit room or some other administrative function at the station rather than work by himself in the field, depending on the location throughout the city. In another description, there's a situation in which I believe a gang officer is logged on as an ACAR and went code 6 at the station. I've actually seen a number of situations in the past where situations exactly like this have occurred when that single GED unit is scheduled to work that day and not have a supervisor to supervise that unit. Typically what happens, that unit will be assigned an ACAR and be asked to work the station instead because they can't, as a gang unit, as you know, actually work the field without supervision. I suspect that in that case, again, if my belief is accurate, he actually worked the station in an admin function. There's also an example of a watch commander logging on as the field supervisor. If the lieutenant watch commander or the AWC had been absent that day and another sergeant was to act as the watch commander, in those instances when another sergeant is sitting in his place or her place, sometimes they end up logging on with their regular unit designation. Instead of L10 or L20 being the lieutenant watch commander of the AWC, they'll log on as L30 or L40.
So Chief, you're giving some specific...
just for clarification.
For clarification. But at the end of the day, the good thing about this is that your reaction to this was not, well, maybe this is, and maybe that isn't, and maybe this is. You came up with a solution. You came up with a solution. It was an aggressive solution. Your solution was to say to everyone, not just the people that were in this in the sample. You said to everybody, look, this can't happen, and it's got to stop. It did. And you stopped it. So, I read this. I've talked to officers about it. I've talked to command staff about it. I talked to one other commissioner because the city attorney won't let me talk to more commissioners about it. But at the end of the day, this department operates between a rock and a hard place every day. You want the bad guys to have a perception that we're fully staffed with appropriate support and equipment. You want the bad guys to know, to think that. But the reality is this department is underfunded. These officers, in spite of the progress with the overtime budget, are underpaid. We need more overtime. And so you're stuck between these two things, and the only solution, which you implemented, I think, beautifully in this case, is to, when the Inspector General or any of us, whether it's the public or the commission, or somebody just reporting in, like you said, one officer, this started with one officer after 20 years making a statement that was taken seriously, that you react aggressively and that you stop, and if you find that there is behavior, even if it's only half the things that are reported because the others are different circumstances, that you were aggressive and that you stopped it. And the fact that we are, in the next 24 months, going to do random checks to make sure it stays stopped, I think is very well done. That's my perception of this entire situation. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you from the Inspector General's office. I want to echo Mark Cronin, the director of PPL, his comments earlier. Sorry, I can talk into this mic. Thanks.
I brushed my teeth.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get used to talking in my. Thank you. I think that it's important to ask. I recognize President Soboroff's comments as well, that it's really important that the practice is not occurring anymore, and it's great that the Inspector General's office did such wonderful work, incredible work, responding to the concerns of the officers and following up and investigating and working with the command staff in the department to ensure that this problem was fixed. But I also think it's important to diagnose why it did happen. I understand that there's some, right, I understand what you're saying, Chief Paysinger, that there is some disagreement as to these specific examples, and perhaps there are more, because it seems like from the tone of the report that there were other examples, but these ones were picked in the summary conclusion to just illustrate the issue. I want to assume that it's true that these officers did come forward to the Inspector General's office and make these complaints, and if that is the case, then there has to be a root cause of that, and I think it is important to understand what the cause was and provide some thought and reflection and analysis into what that was, regardless of whether or not there are details in disagreement as to these specific examples, because something caused the officers to come forward, something caused the Inspector General's office to follow up in a diligent and thorough manner as they did, and then, you know, in the end, like Commissioner Soboroff just said, it's great that the problem, whether it's fabricated or not, it's great that it's not occurring anymore, but again, the complaints did come from the officer complaints that this practice was occurring did come from somewhere. So I think it's important to pay attention to that and think about it. And then also I think it's important to I know that there's a plan for follow-up, a remedial plan for follow-up, and I think it's important to understand what that is also in order to determine whether or not it's responsive to what those root causes, those initial root causes were. So I understand that there will be these random checks. The Inspector General also mentioned that there's an audit plan for all the divisions, or an inspection of all the divisions.
The department's agreed to
Right.
Audit and inspect all 24 divisions within a 2-year period of time on this stuff. And we'll work with the department, I think, for clarification for some of the issues that Chief Paysinger had brought up as far as the factual stuff. I think it's important to make that step forward, but I also think it's important to kind of acknowledge what we do have. And I would disagree with some of the characterizations that the Chief made, specifically because we looked into some of the things, the explanations that he had given, and shown that those weren't in case true. Some of the examples being people logging in when they were at home, or people logging in other circumstances. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the Chief's characterization on this, but I think the bigger part of this is how do you fix it going forward, and how do you make sure it doesn't happen again? And I think in that situation, the Chief and the department and I are in lockstep on how to go forward, and also how to fix this thing in the future.
Yeah, I think that's very clear, and I'm very pleased to see that. And I also think, however, that I want to go back to my earlier point that a remedial plan perhaps is more effective when some kind of thought analysis has gone into what may have been the root causes for the issue in the first instance. That's all.
Well, it's difficult for the department to ascertain that, because we have not been made, it has not been made available to us who came forward. I cannot ask the individual who came forward, because the Inspector General has not provided that to us. Now, you may be able to ask them. Now, the Inspector General says that somebody logged on from home. I find that very, that is the first time I have ever heard that, and that is certainly not
Likewise,
in any report that I saw.
And also, I don't want to hypothesize, but or say things that are too much in speculation. But I have a sense that it might be possible to diagnose a problem or provide some kind of thought and deliberation as to the cause of the problem without risking the anonymity of the individuals that came forward. But that, that's just my own sort of speculation. And I'd love to hear from the Inspector General's office as well, whether or not it is a valuable consideration to think about these root causes, and whether it's possible to put some thought into it without risking the anonymity of the individuals that came forward, because that obviously that would sacrifice all the work of the Inspector General's office, and also all the great work that the department has done.
Commissioner, perhaps just redacting the names out of the report to give us an opportunity to look at the work product and the information that led to these revelations. I mean, one of the reasons why it's difficult, as the chief mentioned, to respond in a coherent way is because we weren't, for the reasons that the Inspector General identified, we weren't privy to any of the work product, any of the substantive documents, the information upon which these allegations were based. In the absence of that, notwithstanding the fact that we've looked very thoroughly and thoughtfully at a fair number of divisions to see whether or not this practice had occurred, we're in a difficult predicament. And if we were to be provided that information from the Inspector General's office, I'd be more than happy to take the next step forward.
Hey, Commissioner, if I could just quickly add, because I think this is important for everyone to kind of understand, and I've no doubtly had several conversations with the department on this fact. The reason why several people come to me and talk to me is because they don't feel comfortable coming to the department. They don't want to come to the department because they're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of some retribution. The reason that my office is uniquely positioned to look at some of these issues and to make sure that we're in a position to ferret them out to the extent they exist is because I do provide them some anonymity, and I will not share that, the name of the individual, and nor will I share them documents which they'll be able to ascertain the name of individuals, because it jeopardizes the very mission of my office and precludes me from actually doing the things that I'm duty-bound to do, which is to look in the places where no one else is looking and give the officers or the community a voice to make sure that the right thing's being done. So I will not share that information. I think it's counterproductive to share. But what I do share with the department, and Chief Jacobs, Chief Pasinger, and other people in the department will do, is we shared our entire methodology. We shared with them how we investigated, what we looked at, what we looked for, so we could educate them on how to recreate the investigative steps. They don't need to know who the people are. They will not know who the people are, and I will not share that information under any circumstance.
For the record, I just want to add that I'm not interested in knowing the names of the individuals. Yeah. I understand the methodology, but the work product to understand exactly how they came across the information. That's all.
Commissioner?
Oh, I just want to emphasize and reinforce once again that absolutely the anonymity of the individuals that came forward should not be sacrificed, and nothing I said suggested that. And I think that the work of the Inspector General's office is critical to the city and the department, and if any of that, and if any of those information sources were at risk, then it would really jeopardize.
Chief, you were cut off, and I don't think you're used to being cut off.
Well, I cut him off.
No, you were cut off.
No, I mean, not as a rule. But, let me make it extremely clear that the department does not want to jeopardize the Inspector General's autonomy. The department does not want to jeopardize the Inspector General's ability to communicate with the rank and file. That is not our goal. The Commissioner asked the why, and it's difficult for me to say the why without having the knowledge of the who. And it's not that I want to know, it's that it is more difficult. And I can speculate, and that might be worth doing, but then again, it's just mere speculation.
Okay.
I think the important thing is that this is not part of the culture of the Los Angeles Police Department. This is not something that we condone, that we encourage, or that we foster through our policies. It's tough being a Los Angeles police officer, and sometimes it's even tougher being a manager in the Los Angeles Police Department. There is a tremendous amount of accountability. And there is pressure that goes with that accountability. But there's also an extreme amount of authority that goes with both positions, and those forms of accountability are needed.
Yeah, I appreciate all those concerns. I just and correct. I asked the why question, and I do think that's an important question. But I appreciate your response.
I started out by asking about culture, and I asked about culture because, as a former journalist, I fully understand all the issues regarding investigations, paper trails, being able to figure out who said what based on what documented information exists, and that's why I stayed away from it. The issue regarding culture for me is very important here, because I'm going back to what I was driving at earlier was, did we have indications that there were police officers, rank and file, who went to their superiors to say that this was a problem. Now, if that didn't happen, that speaks to culture. If they went straight to the Inspector General, that speaks to culture. And a few weeks ago, maybe a month and a half or so ago, I asked about, I think I asked the Inspector General to work on developing an ethics policy, an ethics policy that would be department-wide and one that would have to be affirmed annually. Because if there were such a policy from top to bottom, any kind of obfuscation, any kind of not sharing information, anything along those lines would be a violation of the ethics policy. And so, if such a practice were going on, for whatever the reasons, if they were not true and accurate, then the persons involved are duty-bound to report it. Then it's not about, was I afraid to report? You have to report it.
There is no absence of policy in the Los Angeles Police Department. We have extreme and complex policies regarding all of this. Now we can make it more obvious.
Yeah.
But there are certainly rules against this, and it is not a lack of rules. And we'll work with the Inspector General, and if the Commission wants to have something authored
So
that the Chief will put forward.
in the spirit of finishing my thought, I asked for the Inspector General to come up with a recommended ethics policy that it has an annual affirmation, right? Different from when you first hit the academy, different from then when there's a reminder that comes out on the roll call. This is annually. In writing, you have to affirm that you are, in fact, being honest in all of your dealings.
Commissioner Saltzman, I want to give you a chance to jump in here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a few comments, and then I do have two questions for the chief that follow up on much of what we've been talking about. So first, I want to thank the officers who originally came forward to the Inspector General to report the problem. And in some cases, they risked negatively affecting their own career prospects in the department to do so. And had those officers not been dedicated to helping the department improve, perhaps at risk to themselves, this particular falsification of the data might still be happening. Second, I want to thank the Inspector General for the report. It clearly explains what is a complex set of problems, as demonstrated by what we're hearing today. More important, it has already resulted in the department's correction of this particular problem. And so third, I would like to thank Chief Beck, Chief Paisinger in particular, and the department for the prompt and unequivocal response to the concerns initially raised by the officers and the Inspector General. It is just that sort of quick, clear response to problems that we as commissioners expect from the chief and the department. Having said that, I am troubled that this report is now the second instance in recent months in which there have been serious questions raised about the accuracy of the data being used by the department, and in some cases being reported publicly. Now, we all recognize that using data to drive the department is effective, but this situation, again, I think, reminds us that we also need to remain especially vigilant to ensure that we don't put so much pressure on those reporting on the data that we somehow incentivize shortcuts or misreporting the data. Chief Beck has said on more than one occasion, his goal is for the department to be transparent beyond reproach. One aspect of that transparency is to be as open as possible with the data the department collects and reports. And our action today, I'm assuming we will approve this report, is an important step toward achieving that goal, but it is one step of many. And that takes me to this specific report. First, I'm going to request that the Inspector General and the department report back to us in 90 days on the status of the follow-up measures taken to assure this problem is not continued. I will propose we add that follow-up report to the motion when we approve the report. But as Commissioner Kim has pointed out, it seems to me there's a bigger problem here, which we have not yet clearly identified and certainly not resolved, a bigger problem that needs more attention. In this particular case of the patrol deployment, Inspector General's explained the problem. departments responded, and we're assured that that this is not happening anymore. But it seems to me we ought to step back and focus on the underlying problem. And it seems to me that relates to how we collect and how we use data and metrics. Along those lines, I have two questions for the chief. I'll ask them both since they're related, and then I hope that you will be able to answer them. And they follow along Commissioner Kim's comments. My question is, the first is, why did this happen? What is the incentive for command officers to have this happen? This is not simply, based on what's in the report, individual patrol officers. There's clearly the involvement of command officers. So one question is, why did this happen? What is the incentive for the command officers to do this? And then second, what actions, I understand the actions that have been taken on this particular issue, but more broadly, what actions have been taken to fix this underlying problem about data and whether the incentives regarding reported data are being paid attention to carefully and resolved to the extent they're problematic? And those are two questions, Chief, that I would ask you.
So the incentive, and this is speculation because, again, the details in the report intimate that command officers are the source, but I can't draw that direct connection because it's not there. I mean, I'm an investigator. I was chief of detectives. I require a concrete trail before I'll draw a conclusion. So if we're speculating that this comes from command officers rather than or the origin is from command officers, then the incentive would be to meet the goals that are placed upon them by their boss, which is the Office of Operations. Office of Operations puts a patrol plan requirement in place, not 100%, as is intimated in this report. Matter of fact, it's very rarely 100%. It's usually in the 70 or 80% range, so that commands have some flexibility on where they deploy their people. And occasionally, a captain may feel that that his decisions are more important than the Office of Operations decisions, and that might lead to this. Now, there are many ways to deploy police officers, and 911 response is one way. That is not the only way. And matter of fact, that may not be the best way to reduce crime. As a matter of fact, in my experience, and I've been a command officer in multiple divisions and been part of the department's crime reduction for the last dozen years, it may not even be a good way to reduce Part 1 crime. It's a good way to respond to 911 calls, but rarely does it lead to a crime reduction. So you are constantly mixing the ways that you assign police officers. Footbeat units are a good example. Footbeat units are very, very rarely available for radio calls. Once in a while, as the chief pointed out, the department will activate them and make them available for radio calls. But they're a very effective way at dealing with Part 1 crime in certain areas. And so a captain may want to put more footbeats out to deal with Part 1 crime, but can't do so because of the perceived constraints of the patrol plan goals. Because patrol plan is not about necessarily reducing crime, it's about meeting response time goals. And so there's a constant mix. You know, the other thing that I caution everybody in this discussion about, this is much more complicated than this report makes it look. There are dozens of ways to deploy police officers, all very legitimate, and they're not captured by patrol plan. And so while it looks like on the surface when you read the report, it looks like it may be a way that command officers are trying to avoid work. It's actually maybe a way that they're trying to meet their other goals. Because the patrol plan is not the only goal put on these commands. They have crime reduction goals. They have community engagement goals, they have employee wellness goals, and all of them compete. And so, you know, to look at this through the knothole, so to speak, and just think of it as patrol plan, it's much, much more than that. So that, to answer your first question, that may be the incentive, maybe. And now I can't tell, because the other incentive, you know, this can also be done at the watch commander level. You know, the captain says, hey, you guys need to hit your patrol plan numbers, and the watch commander goes, oh, I know a way to do that, and he might move the cars around. So you can't, without asking the question, you can't tell where the origin is. And so that makes it a little bit difficult. But suffice it to say that this doesn't come from the officer working the car. The officers working the car, this is agnostic to them. They don't, you know, whether they're logged on as an XL car, which counts, or a ZL car, which doesn't count, or an FB car, which doesn't count, or a, you know, or a W unit, which doesn't count, or, you know, all the multiple designations, or a J car, or all the other cars that we have out there that do a police function, but don't count towards patrol plan. So it's certainly not officer-driven, and that's not where we put our focus. And that's not where Chief Paysinger put his focus in making sure that the problem is corrected to whatever extent it exists. And, you know, I think he tried to put it in some kind of perspective for you. You know, 6 examples, some of which we agree with, some of which we don't, out of hundreds of thousands of deployments. So this needs to be put in that kind of perspective. So that's the possible motivation. Now, as to what we do to adjust that, well, there's 2 things. First, to make sure that everybody understands that this is clearly a wrong thing to do, and that we need accurate deployment numbers going to the Office of Operations, not only because we need them for what we do for a living, but because we want people to understand that we expect the truth. And if for whatever reason you can't comply with patrol plan, then you need to be able to come forward and say, I can't comply with patrol plan because I have this, this, and this. And then we need to make sure that our goals are reasonable. And you know, that's not to say that they aren't, but we need to make sure that they are. And Chief Paysinger and I talk about this, and you know, he has aggressive goals, as you expect from us. You know, well, this is not a high-performance organization because it has no goals, or because we let the employees self-direct.
Chief, this will not be the last time in the history of this department that we're going to be surprised by something that went wrong. And I hope that every single time that this department responds the way it responded in this case. And I believe that our process with civilian oversight, by charter authority, and with our Inspector General, allows this kind of process to continue on in the future. Whenever there is something that's wrong, that someone feels that they can contact the Inspector General without being called out, and that if the Inspector General, through his process, makes his report and talks to the department, that the department will respond just the way it did this time.
Mr. President, I certainly agree with that, but I think there's also a bigger issue, and I appreciate the Chief's responding to that on the merits, acknowledging that we expect the data to be accurate, we rely on it to be accurate, and we do not want it to be anything but that. And second, I appreciate very much your saying that one thing you do in this, given the importance of the data, is to review the goals that are driving the performance that's leading to the reporting of the data. And I appreciate your saying that. I think it's very important for us to know that and to know that you're doing that. I also just want to clarify one point. It sounded like at any point that I had suggested that this was somehow someone avoiding work. I did not mean to do that. I have no sense anywhere in this that is what's going on. My sense from the report we have was it simply had to do with representing the data in a way that it would meet a standard, as opposed to somebody not actually doing the work.
And it also gives them clear direction and produces, uncontrovertible results.
We do have one more speaker.
I'm sorry,
We'll
if I could just,
bring up after.
I'm sorry.
I think one of the keys here, you point out the variety of goals beyond the patrol plan that put pressures on the captains. But to me, I mean, that makes complete sense. But then given how data-driven the department is, it's important that the data that the officers are reporting, that the command officers are reporting, is accurate. And so if it's these other pressures, the wellness program, community policing, that is creating an incentive for the watch commanders or the captains, whoever it happens to be, to misrepresent the data, then that's a systemic problem. And that, to me, that's the cause. That's the root problem that Commissioner Kim was asking about. And that's where I'm hopeful I'm hearing you say that not just what Commissioner Soboroff has pointed out so clearly, we solved this problem, but that you've stepped back and looked at the incentives and the data collection and all the different pressures on those reporting to make sure that the system allows them to report accurately given all the pressures on them, and it does not incentivize them to report inaccurately to meet one set of things that's measured as opposed to other things that are not measured that are equally important.
Yep.
And we agree with that. And I think that Chief Basinger made that eminently clear for those that didn't understand or were forgetting their responsibility.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, that was a really helpful, thoughtful response, and I think that kind of analysis can take place without, again, calling into question the anonymity of the individuals who initially reported.
And the department is not interested in the identity of those folks. I want people to come forward with this. This is, Detective Willis is not the only one who was first heard about ghost cars this way. I've been here for almost 40 years, and I had never heard the term. So, we want to make sure that as we move forward, we don't create things that are adverse to our overall mission.
We have another speaker?
Well, he's been trying to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. He's been trying to speak.
Excuse me.
Who's that?
Detective Willis.
Detective Willis.
I'm sorry.
The Inspector General still has not given me a raise, so I'm making Detective 3 pay right now. The one thing that would be helpful, I think, to the Commission, and this is not the forum, because the OO report was sent to Internal Affairs Group. I've read that report, and I believe that report would be helpful for this Commission to put our report in some context. If you have the charter authority to review that report, I highly recommend it.
Okay.
And the department will make that available.
Okay.
Okay, we do have one comment.
Charter authority or not.
We have Mr. David Nunez.
Welcome, sir.
Good morning, sir. First of all, before I start, I'd like to thank Alex Bustamante for his office and supporting the rank and file. I also want to thank our chief for listening to the concerns of our officers. And now I'll make my statement. It's not really easy to come up here and talk about issues of concern, but I've invested 31 years in this department, and I love my department, and I like being a public servant. But our officers, they fear management. They feel that once they identify an issue, they're going to suffer retaliation and harassment, and eventually the loss of job. We have an issue here that needs to be resolved. And the only way it's going to be resolved, if our chief here meets with all the officers, and he guarantees that there will be no reprisals, no retaliation, and no harassment for any of the command officers, and you'll get the full story. I can tell you this, that we do have issues that can be changed, and if the chief works with us, we can do it. As far as the issues that came down regarding ghost cars and the unit manipulations to bolster the numbers for CompStat, that is true. It did happen. And the pressure came down from the command level. That is the bottom line. What I offer is this. Having been a watch commander for 9 years, I would have never bend forward to the pressure from any command officer to misrepresent the units and deceive our community, our beloved community that we work for. I love my department, and I look forward to working with the chief and whoever wants to sit down and work with me and identifying these issues of concern so our officers can feel supported and safe out there, not just from the bad guys, because there are more numbers of us out there because we finally got the units, but that the community supports us and that our chief and the management here care about the rank and file. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a motion?
I move approval of item 8B with the instruction that the Inspector General and the department report back to us in 90 days on the progress made.
Second.
Jinx? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good, thank you. Good discussion.
We're now on item number 9, public comment. We have 2 comment cards. We have Mr. Herman, followed by John Ramirez.
I'd first like to acknowledge Michael A. Harris, a reporter from San Francisco, investigator of the Chronicle, who inspired the Brown Act, journalism, for open meeting laws. And then today, hearing this conversation, this last topic, this behavior of deployment, unreasonable excuses of the ghost cars. I know very well that this exists, and I'm not even a police officer or involved in law enforcement.
Mr. Herman, address the board, please.
This is general public comment, sir.
Address the board.
So, again, to improve our safety as citizens in the area of this, I'm going to make it real simple. KISS. Keep it real simple. And that is, I am an advocate. I am not built to sit, stand, or line up and keep quiet. Again, keep quiet all the time. I need movement, and I will use my speaker card to open the eyes of the public, to get the right response by our commissioners who listen and acknowledge the fact that there are issues that need to be discussed on matters of importance to the public's interest. And then again, the General Inspector's Office or Inspector General's Office to conduct an investigation that will safeguard the integrity, as put up on these walls, the integrity in all we say and do for every constituent within the city of Los Angeles, within the city limits. And again, let us not forget persons of interest, our Department of Veteran Affairs, our fellow Americans who are homeless in the streets, who are being basically discriminated against and not helped. They need homes and they need refuge. And again, let us not use excessive force to people who are disabled. Thank you.
John Ramirez.
Welcome, sir.
How you doing? Welcome. This is for the Chief of Police, for the Commissioner, and Attorney General. I came like 2 weeks ago to let you hear a problem that I had in the streets with the officer that was making nasty videos in front of my little girl. And as soon as I left here 2 weeks ago, I got approached by that officer and 2 guys that he was with that work with him, and told me that if I came back over here, that we're just going to shoot me and get it over with. And I went to the police department to go make another report, and I'm not welcome in that department no more. They don't want me going in there because they know this officer, and they don't want me going in there, and they didn't want to help me make the report. So I'm just asking for some help. So for the record, I want to know if I could submit this cassette of stating what first happened and who led to the incident. And I don't think it's right that he goes and makes accusations about me toward my little girl when I never done nothing to her. And the evidence is still right there at the Hall of Records, and people don't want to help me. You sent an internal affairs lady that don't want to call me back anymore. I've been trying to call, and nobody wants to help me with this issue. It's getting worse in the street. Everywhere I go, it just keeps constantly threatening me about it. I better not tell on them. And I got more evidence that I want to submit, but I'm scared to carry it with me, that they're going to try to jump and get it from me. So I'm trying to hope that maybe I can get some kind of help here. You know, it's getting everywhere I go. He's following me and just threatening me constantly and the judges at the police department, at the courts, they don't want to help me because they say they know him. So I don't know what to do any longer in the streets. So I'm going to my church people to help me and put a camera and videotape everything. But, you know, I'm just asking for some help somewhere.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we do have one additional card. We have Matt Feingood.
Welcome, Mike.
It's Matt,
Matt,
actually.
Matt.
Sorry about that. My writing is pretty rushed. So I've prepared a little statement on my iPhone here. My name's Matt Feingood. I'm a former intern with the Trust for Public Land. This is my first meeting. I found it pretty interesting and exciting. In the spirit of collecting data, I have an excellent opportunity. I'd like to recommend the department gather data on crimes in city parks with fences and city parks without. The goal of the project would be the department to give their blessing to hopefully reduce the number of fences around parks to improve access, which may in turn improve community policing. I'd like to point out that one of the coolest public spaces in LA does not have a fence, the LA Police Academy in Elysian Park. I'd also like to point out it's a great place for a first date. Obviously, most parks don't have such a strong security presence, but with technology and more community policing, there's potential to take down park fences. Some creative ideas to fund better security could be selling naming rights to parks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
There are no additional comment cards. We're now on item number 10, closed session. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss items numbers 10A, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in accordance with Government Code 54957. We're back in open session. In closed session, item number 10A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 10A2 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 10A3 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. And in closed session, item number 10A4 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion for adjournment?
I move we adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, good.